Tycoon cheats on his wife and gets his mistress pregnant with triplets without knowing. The Lee Corporation stocks dropped another 3% this morning, his assistant announced, setting a folder on his immaculate desk. Min-ho didn't turn. Prepare the acquisition documents. We move next week. Yes, Chairman. When the door closed, Min-ho allowed himself a small smile. Another company folded into his empire, another step toward becoming untouchable. He checked his watch, platinum, a gift from his father-in-law on his wedding day 10 years ago, a reminder of the alliance that had cemented his rise. The intercom buzzed. Chairman, your wife is here to see you. Min-ho's jaw tightened. Unscheduled visits from Yoon-jia were rare and seldom pleasant. He smoothed his tie. Send her in. Jia entered like a cool breeze, elegant in a designer suit that complemented her slender frame. At 38, she carried herself with the practiced poise of a woman born into wealth and groomed for power. Her expression, as always when they were alone, was carefully neutral. This is unexpected, Min-ho said, not moving to embrace her. The Charitable Foundation Gala is tonight, Jia replied, her voice measured. Your mother called to confirm our attendance. I assumed you'd forgotten. Min-ho suppressed a flash of irritation. I hadn't forgotten. Of course not. Jia placed an envelope on his desk. The seating arrangement. We're at the main table with my parents and yours. The press will be there. Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Another performance of their perfect marriage awaited. Your mother mentioned the Jung family will attend, Jia continued, her finger tracing an invisible pattern on his desk. Their daughter is expecting their second child. Your mother made sure to emphasize that part. Min-ho felt the familiar pressure building behind his temples. Jia. 10 years, Min-ho, she said quietly, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the pain beneath. How much longer will they keep counting? The weight of their shared failure hung between them. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of negative pregnancy tests, of fertility treatments, of whispers at family gatherings. 10 years of watching his mother's disappointment grow with each passing year without an heir. The doctors said many things. Jia cut him off, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Your mother doesn't care what doctors say. She cares about a grandson to inherit Galaxy Group. Min-ho turned back to the window, unable to face the accusation in her eyes. Their marriage, like most in their circle, had been an alliance first, the merger of two powerful families. The CEO's industrial might combined with the Yoon's political connections. Love was supposed to grow later, the heir a natural conclusion. But time had passed, and they'd become strangers sharing a life of luxury and emptiness. I have a board meeting, he said finally. I'll meet you at the gala. Jia lingered a moment, as if waiting for something more. A touch, a kind word, any acknowledgement of their shared pain. When none came, she straightened her shoulders. 7 o'clock. Don't be late this time, she said, turning to leave. At the door, she paused. Your mother has invited the new fertility specialist to sit at our table. She thought it would be convenient. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt like a gunshot. Min-ho loosened his tie, feeling suddenly trapped. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a contact simply labeled E. His thumb hovered over it as guilt and desire waged their familiar battle within him. After a moment's hesitation, he typed, "Can you meet tonight?" The response came almost immediately. "I thought you had that gala? I'll make an excuse. I need to see you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, the usual place. 9 p.m. Min-ho slipped the phone into his pocket, a sense of release washing over him. Tonight, for a few stolen hours, he would escape the suffocating expectations of his family, his in-laws, his position. Tonight, in the arms of Park Eun-ha, he would feel alive again. As he turned back to the Seoul skyline, the empire he'd built spread out before him like a vast kingdom. Everything he'd ever wanted was his, except the one thing money couldn't buy: freedom from the golden cage he'd helped construct around himself. The intercom buzzed again. "Chairman, the board members are assembled in the conference room." Minho straightened his tie. It was time to be the tycoon again. That concludes today's agenda, Minho announced, closing the leather portfolio before him. I expect the acquisition reports on my desk by tomorrow morning. As the board members filed out, his CFO lingered behind. Chairman, there's one more thing. The design team needs approval for the new product launch. Minho checked his watch. Can't this wait until tomorrow? The design lead says they need decisions today to meet the production deadline. With a barely concealed sigh, Minho nodded. Send them up. 20 minutes later, a soft knock interrupted his phone call. Come in, he called, not looking up from his computer screen. Chairman CEO, I've brought the design prototypes for your approval. The melodic voice made him freeze. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to meet the warm brown eyes of Park Eun-ha. At 27, she possessed the rare combination of striking beauty and understated elegance. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around a face that could launch 1,000 marketing campaigns. But it was her brilliance that had first caught his attention 6 months ago. Her innovative designs had saved a failing product line. Mississippi Park, he acknowledged, his tone professionally distant despite the quickening of his pulse. I wasn't expecting you personally. Eun-ha smiled, the slight dimple in her left cheek appearing briefly. Director Kim is unwell. I volunteered to present instead. She placed 3 sleek prototypes on his desk, careful not to let her fingers brush against his. To any observer, they were merely employer and employee, appropriate, professional, distant. Only they knew the truth hidden behind closed doors. These are the final options, she explained, her voice steady as she detailed the technical specifications. Only the slight flush on her neck betrayed any emotion. Minho forced himself to focus on the prototypes rather than the curve of her lips or the memory of her skin against his. The blue concept is too conservative. The red has potential. He pointed to the third option. This one. Explain the thinking behind it. Eun-ha leaned forward slightly, passion animating her features as she discussed her creation. Her enthusiasm was contagious, genuine in a way rarely seen in his world of calculated business moves. It represents breaking traditions while honoring our heritage, she concluded. Something new born from something established. Their eyes met, the double meaning hanging in the air between them. Bold choice, he murmured. Not everyone will approve. The best decisions rarely receive universal approval, Chairman, she replied, holding his gaze a moment longer than professionally appropriate. Minho cleared his throat. I'll take these home to review. You can expect my decision tomorrow. Of course. She gathered her materials, maintaining the charade. Will there be anything else? No, that's all, Mississippi Park. As she turned to leave, his phone lit up with a message from his wife. Mother asking if you've left the office yet. What should I tell her? The reminder of his other life landed like a stone in his stomach. Eun-ha noticed his expression change. Is everything all right, Chairman? She asked. Her voice softened with genuine concern. The gala tonight, he said, rubbing his temple. Politics disguised as charity. She nodded understandingly. The burdens of your position never seem to lighten, do they? Something in her words, the acknowledgement of his struggles without judgment, made him lower his guard momentarily. Sometimes I wonder if any of it is worth it, he admitted, surprising even himself with the confession. Eun-ha hesitated at the door. We all have our cages, Chairman. Some are just gilded more beautifully than others. The room felt charged with unspoken words as they regarded each other. For a fleeting moment, they were just a man and a woman, not a powerful CEO and his employee. The moment broke when his phone rang, his mother's ringtone. 9 o'clock, he said quietly as Eun-ha opened the door. She nodded almost imperceptibly before stepping out, her professional mask firmly back in place. The luxurious hotel suite had become their sanctuary over the past 4 months. Away from prying eyes and corporate politics, it was the one place Minho could shed the weight of being CEO Minho, chairman of Galaxy Group. You're distracted tonight, Eun-ha murmured, her head resting on his chest as they lay tangled in the sheets. The gala's formal proceedings continued 20 floors below, But Minho had made his appearance, given his speech and disappeared, a migraine being his excuse. "The acquisition is more complicated than anticipated," he replied, stroking her hair absently. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face with eyes that always seemed to see through his pretenses. "That's not it," Minho sighed. Unha possessed an uncanny ability to read him, a quality both comforting and terrifying. Jia mentioned children again today. Unha's expression remained neutral, though he felt her body tense slightly. "I see," she said carefully. "And what did you tell her?" "Nothing new. What could I say?" He sat up, reaching for the water on the bedside table. 10 years of specialists, treatments, disappointments. The doctors say there's no medical reason why we can't conceive. It just hasn't happened. Unha was silent for a long moment. "Do you want children, Minho?" she finally asked, using his name without titles, something she did only in these private moments. The question hung in the air. In public, the answer would be simple. Of course the chairman wanted an heir. But here, in this room, "I never thought about it before I was married," he admitted. "Children were just an expected box to check. Graduate, top of class, take over the company, marry well, produce an heir. But now," he trailed off. "Now?" she prompted gently. "Now I wonder what kind of father I would be. My own father was distant. Business always came first." He looked at her. "What about you? Do you want children someday?" A shadow passed over her face. "Someday, with someone who could be there for them. For me." The unspoken accusation lingered between them. Minho reached for her hand. "Unha, you know my situation is complicated." "You mean your marriage?" Her voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed her pain. "Yes, the marriage that united two powerful families. The merger that can't be undone without destroying everything my grandfather and father built." He tightened his grip on her hand. "But what I feel for you—" "Don't," she interrupted, pulling away. "Don't make promises you can't keep." She rose from the bed, wrapping the sheet around herself as she walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, thousands of lives unfolding in their own complicated patterns. "6 months ago," she said without turning, "you told me in that corporate dinner that my design concept was brilliant but commercially unviable. Do you remember what I said?" Minho smiled despite himself. "You said I lacked vision, that I was too afraid to take real risks. And 3 weeks later, when that design won the international award?" She glanced over her shoulder at him. "You didn't gloat. You just left the magazine on my desk with a note that said, 'Sometimes the most rewarding paths are the ones that terrify us most.'" Unha turned to face him fully. "I'm not asking you to leave her today, or tomorrow. But don't tell me this is all we can ever have while promising it means something more. I deserve better than beautiful lies, Minho." The truth in her words struck him like a physical blow. She did deserve better, better than stolen hours and secret meetings, better than being the other woman to a man who couldn't offer her a future. But the thought of ending it, of never seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, feeling her challenge his thinking and awaken parts of himself he thought long dead, was unbearable. "What if I could find a way?" he asked, the words escaping before he could consider their implications. "Not immediately, but eventually." Hope flickered in her eyes before she suppressed it. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean it," he insisted, getting up and crossing to her. "Give me time to figure things out, to do this right." Unha studied his face, searching for deception. "How much time?" "A year. By this time next year, I'll have a plan." He took her face in his hands. "I promise." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "Promises are dangerous things, Chairman CO. So is falling in love with your employee, Mississippi Park." The admission hung between them, the first time either had named the emotion that had been growing since that first late-night strategy session months ago. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from Jia. "Where are you? Your mother is asking questions I can't answer." Reality intruded on their moment, as it always did. "You should go," Unha whispered, though her eyes begged him to stay. Minho nodded reluctantly. As he dressed, the mask of the chairman settling back over his features, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight, that in making that promise, he had set in motion events beyond his control. The staff bowed as she passed, their expressions carefully neutral. She wondered what they really thought of her, the elegant, accomplished wife who had failed at her most fundamental duty. "Will Chairman Seo be joining you for breakfast, madam?" asked Mrs. Kim, the housekeeper who had served the family for 30 years. "No," Jia replied, settling at the immaculately set table for one. He left early for a business meeting, another lie to cover his absence. He hadn't come home until after midnight, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume beneath the mint of his mouthwash. Jia had pretended to be asleep. "I've prepared your schedule for today," Mrs. Kim continued, placing a tablet beside Jia's plate. "The Women's Association meeting at 11, lunch with Mrs. Park from the Arts Foundation at 1, and the hospital board meeting at 3. Jia nodded, scanning the familiar pattern of obligations that filled her days. Events where she would smile and speak eloquently about charitable causes. Meetings where she would represent the Seo family interests with perfect poise. A life of purpose without meaning. "Also, your mother called. She'd like you to call her back when convenient." Jia's hand stilled over her teacup. Calls from her mother rarely brought good news. "Thank you, Mrs. Kim. That will be all." When the housekeeper had left, Jia picked up her phone and dialed, bracing herself. "Jia." Her mother's voice was sharp, even through the phone. "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. I was at the gala with Minho, mother. You know how these events are. I know that the Jung family announced their daughter's second pregnancy last night. Everyone was talking about it." Jia closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe evenly. "Yes, I heard. We sent our congratulations. Mrs. Seo mentioned you've stopped seeing Dr. Kong." Her mother's disapproval vibrated through the connection. "Dr. Kang's treatments weren't working," Jia replied, keeping her voice level despite the familiar ache spreading through her chest. "We've tried everything she suggested. Then find another doctor. This situation cannot continue, Jia. The merger between our companies was predicated on continuing both family lines. Your father's position is becoming difficult. 10 years of marriage reduced to a failed business obligation. 10 years of temperature charts, hormone injections, scheduled intimacy, and monthly disappointments. I understand, mother." The words tasted bitter. "Do you?" The Seo family is growing impatient. There are whispers that Minho should consider other options. The implication hung in the air between them. Divorce was rare in their circle, but not unheard of when a wife failed to produce an heir. Or worse, Minho could take a mistress with his family's blessing, legitimizing any children she might bear. "I'll make an appointment with the specialist Mrs. Seo recommended," Jia conceded, hating the weakness in her voice. After ending the call, she sat motionless, teacup cooling between her fingers. The mansion's silence pressed in around her, emphasizing its emptiness. No children's laughter, no chaos of toys or schoolbooks, just perfect, sterile elegance. Rising suddenly, Jia walked to Minho's study. She rarely entered this space, his private sanctuary within their shared prison. The room smelled of his cologne and the leather of his books. Trailing her fingers over his desk, she noticed a small key had been left in the top drawer. She hesitated only briefly before turning it. Inside lay various documents, contracts, property deeds, and a small black book. Something about its worn edges suggested frequent handling. Jia withdrew it slowly, feeling like an intruder yet unable to stop herself. Inside were numbers, dates, brief notes. It took her a moment to understand what she was seeing. A record of meetings, hotel names, room numbers, initials instead of names. Her hand trembled as she flipped through the pages, noting the increasing frequency of one particular initial. E. Suite 2105. 9 p.m. E. Late dinner at HR. E. Weekend conference cover. Peninsula. The most recent entry was from yesterday, E-Suite 2105. Told J. Migraine. The book slipped from her fingers, landing on the carpet with a soft thud. Jia felt oddly calm, as if viewing the situation from a great distance. Of course there was someone else. There had been signs, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the growing emotional distance. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital's fertility clinic, confirming her appointment with the new specialist. The irony was almost unbearable. While she subjected herself to more invasive procedures and false hope, Minho was finding comfort elsewhere. With mechanical precision, Jia returned the book to its place and locked the drawer. She walked to her own suite, where she opened her laptop and typed a simple search: Private Investigator Soul Discreet. 3 days later, Jia sat in Dr. Lee's office, her hands folded neatly in her lap as he reviewed her extensive medical history. "You've been through quite a lot, Mrs. Seo," he observed, his kind eyes meeting hers over the thick file. "Multiple IVF attempts, hormone therapies, surgeries." "Yes," she replied simply. What more was there to say? The clinical details couldn't capture the grief of each failure, the monthly cycle of hope and despair. "And your husband? Has he been tested thoroughly?" Jia nodded. "His results were normal." "I see." Dr. Lee leaned forward. "Mrs. Seo, I'd like to try a different approach. Before we consider more invasive procedures, I want to run some specific genetic tests that weren't part of your previous workups." "More tests?" she echoed hollowly. "Will they make any difference?" Something in her tone made the doctor set down his pen. "Mrs. Seo, may I speak frankly?" "Please. I've worked with many couples struggling with fertility. The medical journey is only part of the challenge. How are you coping emotionally?" The unexpected question cracked something inside her. For 10 years, no doctor had asked how she felt, only what procedures she was willing to undergo next. Jia's practiced composure wavered. "I'm tired, Dr. Lee. Tired of being a failure. Tired of seeing disappointment in everyone's eyes." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Tired of living in an empty house with a husband who barely looks at me anymore." Dr. Lee nodded, offering a tissue she hadn't realized she needed. "Have you considered that continuing might not be the right path for you? That there are other ways to build a family, or even to find fulfillment without children?" The suggestion was so contrary to everything she'd been told by her mother, her in-laws, society, that Jia almost laughed. "You don't understand. In my world, this isn't a personal choice. It's an obligation, a duty, even at the cost of your happiness, your health." Jia looked away. "My feelings are irrelevant." "I disagree," Dr. Lee said gently. "No medical intervention will succeed if the patient is suffering under such strain. Perhaps you and your husband could benefit from counseling before we proceed with more treatments." The thought of Minho agreeing to air their private struggles before a stranger was absurd. He could barely discuss their fertility issues with her, let alone a therapist. "That won't be possible," she said firmly. "Please schedule whatever tests you think necessary." As she left the hospital, her phone pinged with an email. The private investigator she'd hired had sent his first report. With trembling fingers, she opened the attachment. The first image showed Minho entering a hotel, the Peninsula, where he claimed to be attending a business conference. The second showed a young woman joining him, her face partially obscured but her profile hauntingly beautiful. The third, time-stamped hours later, captured them leaving separately, the woman glancing over her shoulder as if checking for observers. Jia zoomed in on the woman's face, studying the features of her husband's mistress. She appeared younger, mid-20s perhaps, with a vibrant energy that radiated even through the grainy surveillance photo. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. The final image in the report provided the answer. The woman entering the Galaxy Group headquarters, employee badge visible around her neck. Park Eun-ha, the rising star of the design department. Jia sat motionless in her car, the reality settling around her like a shroud. All those late meetings, the business trips that couldn't be rescheduled, the sudden interest in product design from a man who normally delegated such details. Her phone rang. Minho's assistant, Mrs. Seo, the chairman asked me to inform you he'll be staying in Busan overnight. The negotiations are running longer than expected. Thank you for letting me know, Jia replied, her voice perfectly composed despite the burning behind her eyes. Please tell my husband I hope his business concludes successfully. She ended the call and opened the investigator's report again, noting the documented reservation at the peninsula. Not in Busan, but here in Seoul, for tonight. A strange calm settled over Jia as she drove home. In the mansion's cavernous entryway, she paused before the large family portrait. Her and Min-ho on their wedding day, surrounded by both families, all smiles and expectations. Mrs. Kim, she called, her decision suddenly clear. The housekeeper appeared instantly. Yes, madam. Please have my overnight bag packed. I'll be visiting the family vacation house at the lake. I need some time alone. Of course, madam. Shall I inform the chairman? Jia thought of Min-ho in his hotel suite with the beautiful young designer, of the doctored reports she was paying to receive, of the years spent trying to give him the child he seemingly didn't care about anymore. No, she said softly. I don't think the chairman will notice my absence. As Mrs. Kim hurried away, Jia climbed the grand staircase to her room. On her dresser sat a framed photo from their honeymoon. The last time Min-ho had looked at her with something resembling love in his eyes. She placed the frame face down, then opened her drawer to retrieve the small box of negative pregnancy tests she'd kept over the years, a shrine to her failure that she revisited during moments of self-punishment. Today, she carried it to the bathroom, opened the lid one last time, and then emptied the contents into the trash. Eun-ha hadn't seen Min-ho since their last night together at the peninsula. He had canceled their next meeting with a terse message about complications requiring his full attention. Her messages since had gone unanswered except for a single late-night text. Need time. Trust me. Morning, superstar. Jae-won, her assistant, greeted her with a coffee. You look terrible. Thanks for the compliment, Eun-ha muttered, accepting the cup gratefully. Seriously, are you okay? You've been off all week. Eun-ha forced a smile. Just tired. These deadlines are killing me. In truth, exhaustion was only part of it. For days, she'd been fighting waves of nausea, dismissing it as stress over Min-ho's sudden distance and the company's uncertain future. This morning, she'd barely made it to the bathroom before emptying her stomach. The executive board is having another emergency session, Jae-won whispered. People are saying Chairman Seo hasn't been home in days. Eun-ha kept her expression neutral despite the jolt of concern. Since when did you start listening to office gossip? Since it might affect whether we still have jobs next month. He glanced around and lowered his voice further. My friend in HR says Mrs. Seo hasn't been seen at the mansion either. The rumor is they're separating. The coffee cup trembled slightly in Eun-ha's hand. That's ridiculous. The Seo family doesn't do scandals. Well, something big is happening. Director Kim told the team leads to prepare for a major announcement tomorrow. Before Eun-ha could respond, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of her desk, breathing deeply. Hey, you really don't look good, Jae-won said, frowning. I just need some air. She stood, immediately regretting the sudden movement as the room tilted around her. I'll be back for the meeting. In the restroom, Eun-ha splashed cold water on her face, avoiding her reflection. The symptoms were becoming impossible to ignore, but she'd been refusing to acknowledge the possibility. She counted backward, trying to remember her last period. 7 weeks ago? 8? This can't be happening, she whispered to the empty room. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 4 p.m. Rooftop garden. We need to talk. Her heart raced. After 2 weeks of silence, he wanted to meet. What had changed? Had he made a decision about their future, or was he ending things? The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and nausea. By 3:55, Eun-ha was pacing the company's rooftop garden, a space usually reserved for executive functions. Seoul's skyline stretched before her, the afternoon sun glinting off distant glass towers. Thank you for coming. She turned to find Min-ho looking nothing like the confident, commanding man she knew. His normally immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of strain, shadowed eyes, tension around his mouth. "You didn't give me much choice," she replied, maintaining her distance despite the urge to go to him. 2 weeks of silence, then a mysterious summons. "I apologize for my absence. Things have been complicated." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "The Busan deal collapsed. I heard. Is that why you've been avoiding me?" "Partly." Minho moved to the railing, looking out over the city. "My father-in-law pulled his support at the last minute. A power play to remind me of my dependence on the marriage alliance." Eunha's stomach tightened with a mix of empathy and frustration. Always back to the marriage. "So what happens now?" she asked. "I've been negotiating alternative financing, calling in favors, working 18-hour days to save what I can. And us? Where do we stand in all this?" Minho turned to face her, his expression softening. "That's why I wanted to see you. I've made a decision." He stepped closer. "Once this crisis is stabilized, I'm going to tell Jia the truth." Eunha stared at him, disbelieving. "You're going to leave her?" "It's more complicated than just leaving. But yes, I can't continue living this double life. These past 2 weeks have shown me what matters." He reached for her hand. "I'm going to lose some things I've spent my life building. The merger will fracture. My family will be furious. But I'm tired of sacrificing my happiness for duty." The words she had longed to hear for months now fell around her like rain after drought. Yet instead of joy, she felt a growing panic. "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What changed?" Something flickered in his eyes. Hesitation? "I realized what I stand to lose if I don't make this choice." Eunha withdrew her hand from his. "Minho, there's something—" The words caught in her throat. How could she tell him now, when everything was already in chaos? When his empire was threatening to crumble? "What is it?" he prompted, brow furrowing at her retreat. Before she could answer, the door to the rooftop opened. They stepped apart instinctively, the habit of secrecy too ingrained to break. Director Kim approached, noticeably uncomfortable at interrupting. "Chairman, I apologize, but the bank representatives have arrived early. They're waiting in the conference room." Minho's expression closed immediately, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the chairman's mask. "Tell them I'll be down shortly." When they were alone again, he turned back to Eunha. "We'll continue this conversation later. Can you meet tonight?" The moment for confession had passed. "Yes," she said, despite the fear churning inside her. "The usual place? 8 o'clock." He hesitated, then brushed his fingers against hers, the barest whisper of a touch. "Trust me, Eunha. Things will be different soon." As she watched him walk away, resuming the posture and gait of Chairman Seo, Eunha pressed a hand to her abdomen. Different indeed. The clinic waiting room was deliberately nondescript, its location in a mixed-use building providing anonymity to its patients. Eunha had chosen it specifically because no one from her social circle would ever visit this neighborhood. "Park Eunha," the nurse called. In the examination room, a kind-faced female doctor reviewed her intake form. "You believe you're approximately 8 weeks pregnant?" "Yes," Eunha confirmed. "I've had nausea, fatigue, dizziness, and 2 positive home tests." The doctor nodded. "Let's confirm with blood work and an ultrasound." Lying on the examination table minutes later, Eunha stared at the ceiling as the doctor applied the cold gel to her stomach. The small screen beside her remained dark until the wand pressed against her abdomen. "There we are," the doctor said, adjusting the angle. "Definitely pregnant." Eunha turned to look, expecting to see a tiny blob, the first glimpse of the life growing inside her. Instead, the doctor was frowning slightly, moving the wand methodically. "Is something wrong?" Eunha asked, heart suddenly pounding. "No, not wrong." The doctor tilted the screen for her to see better. "But I'm seeing multiple gestational sacs." "Multiple what?" "You're carrying twins, possibly triplets. It's harder to be certain this early, but The doctor pointed to distinct areas on the screen. See here and here? Separate embryonic developments. Unha stared at the screen in disbelief. The room seemed to spin around her as the implications crashed down. Not just pregnant with multiples. A scandal impossible to hide, impossible to explain away. I'm going to refer you to a specialist in multiple pregnancies. The doctor was saying, her voice seeming to come from far away. This is considered high risk, especially if it's triplets. You'll need more frequent monitoring. High risk, specialist, monitoring. The words washed over her as she struggled to process the fundamental reality. She was carrying Minho's children, plural, while he was in the middle of a corporate meltdown and just beginning to contemplate leaving his wife. Do you have support at home? The doctor asked gently. Multiple pregnancies can be challenging both physically and emotionally. Unha's laugh held no humor. Not exactly. The father? Complicated. She swallowed hard. Very complicated. The doctor handed her tissues to wipe the gel from her stomach. Ms. Park, I don't know your situation, but these babies are going to need you at your strongest. Whatever decisions you need to make, don't delay making them. Back in her apartment that evening, Unha sat on her balcony watching the sunset paint Seoul skyline in shades of gold and pink. On the table beside her lay the ultrasound images, concrete evidence of the impossible situation she faced. Her phone showed 7:30 p.m. In 30 minutes, she was supposed to meet Minho at their hotel. He would be expecting to continue their conversation about his plans to leave his wife, to build a new life, unaware that life had already taken an irrevocable turn. How would he react to the news? Would he welcome these children, or see them as complications to be managed like his business crisis? Would he pressure her to terminate the pregnancy to simplify their already chaotic situation? She thought of Jia, the perfect, polished wife who had failed to provide the heir the family demanded. How cruelly ironic that Unha, the secret mistress, now carried not one but possibly 3 CO heirs in her womb. Her phone buzzed with a message from Minho. Running late. Critical call with investors. Can we make it 9? The reprieve gave her time to think, to decide. Tell him tonight and face whatever came, or wait until she understood more. About the pregnancy, about his true intentions, about her own desires. Unha placed her hand over her still flat stomach, overwhelmed by a sudden fierce protectiveness. These lives hadn't asked to be created in such complicated circumstances. Whatever Minho's reaction might be, whatever scandal might erupt, she would not let these children bear the cost of adult decisions. What am I going to do? She whispered to the darkening sky. Her phone rang, not Minho but J1. Have you seen the news? He asked without preamble, voice tense with excitement. What news? It's all over the business channels. CO Jia just filed a petition with the Regulatory Commission questioning Galaxy Group's latest acquisition. She's using her family's shares to block the emergency restructuring plan. Unha froze. What? Why would she do that? No one knows for sure, but rumor has it she's found out about Chairman CO's extracurricular activities. The room seemed to tilt beneath her. What are you saying? I'm saying Mrs. CO might be ready to burn it all down, and anyone connected to her husband should probably be preparing for fallout. As the call ended, Unha stared at the ultrasound images, the tiny lives that had just become pawns in a high-stakes game they couldn't comprehend. Her decision clarified in that moment with crystal clarity. She texted Minho, "Can't make it tonight. Not feeling well. Need a few days." She sat on the weathered porch, sketching idly as the afternoon sun played on the distant waves. The modest rental house belonged to her mother's cousin, who asked no questions when Unha arrived unannounced, needing a place to focus on a special project. Her hand drifted to her now visible pregnancy bump. At 16 weeks, there was no hiding her condition, though the locals were discreet enough not to pry into the circumstances of the unmarried woman living alone by the sea. "3 of you," she murmured, feeling the first subtle flutters of movement. The specialist in Jeju City had confirmed triplets at her last appointment. 2 boys and a girl. "You're already causing such a commotion," And you're not even here yet. Her phone chimed with a message from her mother. Called your old supervisor again. He says your position remains open. The company is stabilizing under new leadership. Please reconsider coming home. Unha sighed. Her abrupt resignation, citing family health emergencies, had been accepted without question amid the corporate chaos. What her mother didn't understand was that returning to Seoul meant facing the storm she'd fled, and the man at its center. For weeks after her departure, Min-ho had tried every possible way to reach her. Emails, messages through mutual friends, even sending his personal assistant to her apartment. She'd blocked his numbers, ignored the emails, and instructed friends to say nothing. Eventually, the attempts stopped as the media frenzy around Galaxy Group's restructuring consumed all attention. The business news painted a dramatic picture. Chairman Seo fighting for control of his company while his wife's family withdrew support. Emergency board meetings. Rumors of hostile takeovers. Through industry contacts, Unha learned that Min-ho had managed to secure alternative financing, but at a steep cost, surrendering significant control to external investors. Of Jia, there was little news beyond carefully crafted public appearances maintaining the image of the supportive corporate wife. Whatever private battle raged between them remained behind closed doors. Unha's phone rang her doctor's office. Ms. Park, we've had a cancellation this afternoon. Dr. Kim can see you at 3 instead of next week if you're available. Yes, I can be there, she replied, grateful for the earlier appointment. The specialist had been concerned about her blood pressure at the last visit. In Jeju City 2 hours later, Unha lay on the examination table as Dr. Kim moved the ultrasound wand over her rounded belly. Baby A is developing nicely, the doctor noted, taking measurements. Baby B as well. Let's check on little C. Unha watched the screen, still marveling at how clearly she could now see their features. Tiny hands, the curve of spines, even the rhythmic pulse of their hearts. Dr. Kim frowned slightly, adjusting the wand. Baby C is still measuring smaller than the others. The blood flow through the umbilical cord isn't quite what I'd like to see. Fear clutched at Unha's chest. What does that mean? It could be nothing serious. Triplet pregnancies often have one baby smaller than the others. But combined with your elevated blood pressure, Dr. Kim set down the wand and met Unha's eyes directly. Ms. Park, I believe it's time we discuss transferring your care to Seoul National University Hospital. Seoul? But I can't. The facilities here are excellent for routine care, but your pregnancy has progressed to high-risk status. SNUH has the most advanced maternal-fetal medicine unit in the country. They can monitor baby C more effectively and be prepared for any complications. Unha closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Is my baby going to be okay? Dr. Kim's voice softened. With proper care, yes, I believe so. But you need the level of monitoring and intervention that only a major hospital can provide. When would I need to go? As soon as possible. I'd recommend within the week. I can make the referral today. Reality crashed in on the peaceful existence Unha had built in her island refuge. Return to Seoul, where Min-ho and Jia dominated social circles and business news, where her growing belly would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. Yet what choice did she have? These 3 lives depended on her making the right decision, not the easy one. Make the referral, she said quietly. The SNUH maternal-fetal medicine floor was designed to be calming, with soft colors and natural light, but nothing could ease Unha's anxiety as she checked in 3 days later. Every face she saw triggered a spike of panic. Would she encounter someone who knew her? Someone who might connect her to Min-ho? She had registered under her mother's family name, Young, hoping the common surname would provide some anonymity. The specialist, Dr. Song, reviewed her transferred records with focused attention. Triplet pregnancies always carry increased risks, he explained, but I'm particularly concerned about baby C's growth restriction and your rising blood pressure. I'm recommending you stay in Seoul for the remainder of your pregnancy, with twice-weekly monitoring here. Unha nodded, resigned. I'll need to find somewhere to stay. You don't have family in the city? He asked, making notes in her chart. It's complicated. She twisted the strap of her handbag. My family situation isn't straightforward. Dr. Song looked up, his experienced eyes taking in her ringless fingers an anxious expression. Ms. Jung, I've treated many patients in difficult circumstances. Whatever your situation, my only concern is delivering 3 healthy babies and keeping their mother well. Everything else is outside my purview. His matter-of-fact kindness almost undid her. Thank you. Now, I'm admitting you overnight for a complete workup. We'll start you on medication for the blood pressure and run some additional tests. Then we can discuss next steps. That evening, in the sterile quiet of her private hospital room, Unha finally allowed herself to cry, for the first time since fleeing Seoul. Tears for the babies whose health hung in precarious balance. Tears for the life she'd abandoned. Tears for Minho, whom she still loved despite everything. A soft knock interrupted her breakdown. A nurse entered with medication and a sympathetic smile. First day is always the hardest, she said, arranging pills in a small cup. Triplets, right? You're in good hands with Dr. Song. He's the best. Have you worked with him long? Unha asked, grateful for the distraction. 5 years. He's delivered more multiples than anyone in Korea. The nurse checked Unha's blood pressure, frowning slightly at the reading. Try to rest. Stress isn't good for those little ones. That's easier said than done. The nurse patted her hand. 1 day at a time. That's all any of us can manage. After the nurse left, Unha opened her laptop, intending to search for short-term apartments near the hospital. Instead, her fingers moved as if with a mind of their own, typing Seo Minho Galaxy Group into the search bar. The most recent news articles appeared, dated just 3 days earlier. Galaxy Group Chairman Seo announces restructuring completion. Seo credits wife's unwavering support through corporate crisis. Accompanying the second article was a photograph that stopped her breath. Minho and Jia at a corporate gala, his hand resting possessively on her lower back as they smiled for cameras. They looked like the perfect power couple, any marital discord invisible behind practiced public faces. Unha closed the laptop with trembling hands. Whatever promises Minho had made about leaving his wife clearly hadn't materialized. The different future he'd spoken of seemed to be nothing more than the same carefully constructed facade. She placed both hands on her stomach, feeling a series of small kicks in response. It's just us, she whispered to her unborn children. But we'll be okay. Her phone chimed with a message from her mother. Found you a place. Small but clean, near the hospital. Friend of a friend owns it. No questions asked. Despite their complicated relationship, her mother had rallied to support her once. She understood the medical necessity of returning to Seoul. No mention was made of the baby's father, an unspoken agreement to address that reality later. Unha was typing a grateful reply when another message appeared, from an unknown number that made her heart stop. I know you're back in Seoul. We need to talk. Please? Unha. The phone slipped from her suddenly numb fingers onto the bed. How had he found out so quickly? Who had told him? As if answering her unspoken question, another message followed. SNUH administrator is my cousin's husband. Patient privacy only extends so far in Korea. I need to see you. Panic rose like a tide, threatening to drown her. The carefully constructed separation she'd maintained for months was crumbling. She wasn't ready, not emotionally, not practically. Her blood pressure monitor began beeping rapidly as her heart raced. A nurse hurried in, concern etched on her face. Ms. Jung, what happened? Your pressure spiked suddenly. Unha couldn't speak, just gestured weakly toward the phone lying on the blanket. The nurse glanced at the screen, still displaying Minho's messages. Bad news? She asked, adjusting the medication drip. You could say that, Unha managed. Someone I was hoping to avoid knows I'm here. The nurse's expression shifted to understanding. The baby's father? Unha nodded, too exhausted to maintain pretenses. I'm going to give you something mild to help you calm down, the nurse said, preparing an injection for the 4-line. Then I'll make a note in your chart about restricting visitors. Can you do that? Absolutely. This is a maternity ward, not a public venue. You have complete control over who sees you. She administered the medication with practiced efficiency. Rest now. Tomorrow is soon enough to deal with complications. As the mild sedative took effect, Eunha's thoughts drifted. She'd spent months running from this inevitable confrontation. Part of her had always known it would come, the moment when Minho would learn about the children he'd unknowingly fathered. What would he do when he discovered the truth? Demand rights to his children? Offer financial support while maintaining his marriage? Or perhaps something worse, deny them entirely to protect his position? The monitor's beeping slowed as her body relaxed into drug-induced calm. Tomorrow she would face what came. Tonight, she would gather her strength for the battle ahead. Morning brought no clarity, only the harsh reality of decisions that could no longer be postponed. Eunha sat on the edge of her hospital bed, dressed in her own clothes after Dr. Song had cleared her for discharge with strict instructions for rest and medication. "Your mother texted the address," said the nurse, handing her a paper with directions to the apartment. "I've arranged for a hospital car to take you directly there." "Thank you," Eunha replied, gathering her few belongings. She'd deliberately left her phone turned off since the previous night's messages. "Dr. Song also wanted me to remind you about your appointment tomorrow morning. It's important you don't miss it. The medication adjustment needs close monitoring." Eunha nodded, shifting uncomfortably as one of the babies delivered a particularly strong kick. At nearly 17 weeks, their movements were becoming more pronounced, a constant reminder of the life-altering consequences of choices made in stolen moments of passion. As the nurse helped her into a wheelchair, standard procedure for discharge, Eunha finally voiced the question that had kept her awake despite the sedation. "If someone comes looking for me, asking if I'm a patient here," the nurse paused, meeting her anxious gaze. "Without your written permission, we cannot confirm or deny anything about your care to anyone who isn't listed as your emergency contact. Even if they're—" Eunha couldn't bring herself to say it. "Even if they're the father," the nurse finished gently. "Your medical privacy is protected by law." Relief washed through her, quickly followed by a contradictory wave of guilt. Was it right to keep Minho from knowing about his children? Didn't he have a right to know, regardless of her feelings about his apparent reconciliation with Jia? However, the nurse added, guiding the wheelchair toward the elevator, "If you're asking my personal opinion rather than hospital policy." Eunha looked up expectantly. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially in situations like yours. Better to control the narrative than have it control you. They rode the elevator in silence, Eunha turning the nurse's words over in her mind. Control the narrative. But how, when every option seemed fraught with potential disaster? The hospital car waited at the discharge entrance, driver standing attentively beside the open door. As the nurse helped her from the wheelchair, Eunha caught sight of a familiar black sedan pulling into the hospital's circular drive. Her heart stuttered, the same model Minho preferred, with the distinctive Galaxy Group executive parking permit on the windshield. "We need to go now," she said urgently to the driver. "Please." He helped her into the back seat quickly, closing the door as the black sedan stopped several spaces away. Through the tinted windows, Eunha watched as Minho himself emerged from the car, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. "Go," she whispered desperately to the driver. "Please go now." As their car pulled away from the curb, she saw Minho stride purposefully toward the hospital entrance. Minutes too late to intercept her. The narrow escape left her trembling, tears of stress and confusion threatening to spill. The apartment her mother had arranged was indeed small but surprisingly pleasant. A studio on the 15th floor of a secure building, with large windows overlooking a quiet neighborhood far from Galaxy Group's headquarters or the CO family's social circles. Settling onto the sofa, Eunha finally turned on her phone. 6 missed calls from Minho's number. 3 new messages. "Please don't shut me out. Whatever you're going through, let me help. I'll be at SNUH at 10 a.m. I need to see you." And most recently, sent just minutes ago, "They say you've been discharged. Where are you staying? I know about your condition, Eunha. We need to talk face to face." Her fingers hovered over the screen. He knew. Not the full truth, triplets, not just one baby, but enough. The decision to hide had essentially been made for her. With shaking hands, she typed a response. I need time. Please respect that. I'm safe and under good medical care. His reply came instantly. Are they mine? 3 simple words that shattered any illusion of control she might have maintained. Unha stared at the screen, understanding that her answer, or lack thereof, would set an irrevocable course. Truth or continued evasion, confrontation or further flight. As she wrestled with the impossible choice, a second message appeared. Jia knows about us. Has for months. Whatever you're afraid of, that's no longer a factor. Please, Unha, let me see you. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Jia had known all along. Perhaps even before Unha discovered her pregnancy. The carefully orchestrated public appearances, the united front during the corporate crisis, all a facade concealing knowledge of her husband's infidelity. What else might be concealed behind that poised exterior? Anger? Vengeance? Or perhaps something more calculated? Unha's protective instincts flared. If Jia knew about the affair, what might she do if she discovered Unha was carrying the children her own body had failed to produce? With sudden clarity, Unha made her decision. She typed quickly before courage deserted her. They're yours, but there's something you need to know before we meet. The words had seemed right in the moment of decision, but now doubt crept in. Had she made a terrible mistake? Was his silence a rejection, or simply shock? Her phone finally chimed, startling her so badly she nearly dropped it. I'm outside your building. Top floor studio. Correct? Security won't let me up without your permission. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. How had he found her so quickly? The answer came in his follow-up message. Your mother told me. Said it was time we both stopped running. Mom, Unha whispered. A complex mix of betrayal and gratitude washing through her. Of course, her practical-minded mother would cut through the drama and force this confrontation. In her world, problems were faced directly, not avoided. She pressed the intercom button with trembling fingers. You can send him up, she told the security guard, then ended the call before he could respond. 17 weeks pregnant with triplets. She looked down at herself critically. The loose dress she wore clearly showed her condition. There would be no hiding or downplaying the truth. She brushed her hair quickly, a reflexive gesture of vanity that made her laugh bitterly at herself. What did appearance matter now? The knock, when it came, was softer than she expected. 3 gentle taps that somehow conveyed uncertainty rather than demand. The peephole revealed Minho standing outside her door, looking nothing like the powerful corporate chairman from news photographs. His normally immaculate hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. The expensive suit was wrinkled, tie loosened and crooked. With one deep, steadying breath, Unha opened the door. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. His eyes dropped to her rounded belly, widening slightly before returning to her face. May I come in? He asked finally, his voice hoarse. She stepped back wordlessly, allowing him to enter the small space that suddenly seemed impossibly cramped with his presence. Minho remained standing just inside the doorway, as if unsure of his welcome. Your mother was direct. She's always been that way. She told me I was being pathetic, searching for you everywhere except where I should have been looking. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. She also said if I upset you in any way, she would ensure I regretted it for the rest of my natural life. Despite everything, Unha found herself smiling too. That sounds like her. The fragile moment of lightness faded as quickly as it had appeared. Minho's gaze returned to her belly. You said there was something I needed to know, he said quietly. Beyond this, Unha moved to the sofa, suddenly needing to sit down as the weight of the moment, and the babies, pressed upon her. It's not just one baby, she said, resting her hand protectively over her abdomen. It's 3. Minho's knees seemed to give way as he sank into the nearest chair. 3. Triplets. 2 boys and a girl. A sound escaped him, something between a laugh and a sob. 3 babies, he repeated, as if testing the reality of the words. How far along? 17 weeks. He did the mental calculation quickly. From that weekend at the resort, when the board retreat was cancelled because of the typhoon warning. She nodded, remembering those 2 days of stolen intimacy in the deserted luxury hotel, when they'd pretended the outside world didn't exist. I didn't know until after I left Seoul. Is that why you left? Because you were pregnant? No. I left because you promised things would be different, that you were ending your marriage, but nothing changed. The words came out sharper than she intended, years of pain crystallizing into accusation. I left because I couldn't be your secret anymore. I wasn't lying to you, Minho said, leaning forward intently. Things were already in motion, but the corporate crisis hit, and Jia's family. He stopped abruptly. That's not an excuse. I didn't move quickly enough, didn't fight hard enough. I failed you. His raw honesty disarmed her prepared defenses. This wasn't the dismissive, controlling response she'd steeled herself against. When I discovered the pregnancy, she continued, her voice softening, it only confirmed I'd made the right choice in leaving. What kind of life could I offer a child, born into secrecy and scandal? And now, 3 children who deserve their father in their lives. The question hung between them, weighted with implication. I don't know, she admitted. Everything's happening so fast. One of the babies, the girl, she's smaller than she should be. There are complications. That's why I had to come back to Seoul, for specialized care. Concern replaced the hint of accusation in his expression. Is she going to be all right? The doctors are monitoring her closely. Her umbilical blood flow isn't optimal. Eunha's voice caught. They're doing everything they can. Minho moved instinctively to the sofa beside her, though he stopped short of touching her. Whatever you need, the best specialists, any treatment, I'll make it happen. It's not about money or connections. Some things can't be fixed by throwing power at them. I know that. His voice dropped to a near whisper. If anyone understands that lesson, it's me. The pain in his tone made her look up sharply. For the first time, she truly saw the changes in him. The new lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples that hadn't been there months ago. What do you mean? Minho exhaled slowly. Jia and I are separated. Have been for 5 months, though we've maintained appearances publicly during the corporate restructuring. 5 months. The timeline struck her forcefully. That's when you disappeared, yes. She confronted me the night after you left. Said she'd known about us for some time, had suspected other affairs before you. His gaze dropped to his clasped hands. She said she'd been willing to look the other way when she thought it was just physical, but that with you, it was different. How could she possibly know that? Because I changed. Because the man who came home to our empty marriage was no longer willing to pretend. Because I stopped hiding my unhappiness. He gave a bitter laugh. Jia has always been perceptive. She said she could see I truly loved you in 1,000 small ways I never realized I was showing. The confession that he had loved her, truly loved her, pierced Eunha with unexpected force. All those months of telling herself she'd been a fool, that his feelings had been mere convenience or infatuation. The irony, Minho continued, is that we're both trapped in this theater of public unity until the company stabilizes. Her family's backing was conditional on maintaining our perfect image through the crisis. The moment Galaxy Group's position is secure, our separation becomes official. And when will that be? The final agreements were signed last week. The announcement is scheduled for next month. Eunha absorbed this revelation, trying to reconcile it with the narrative she'd constructed during their months apart. Why didn't you tell me this was happening when I was still in Seoul? I tried. That final week, I kept trying to see you to explain. But corporate chaos consumed every moment, and you, rightfully, had stopped believing my promises. He hesitated. Then you were gone. No forwarding address. Phone disconnected. Your friends claimed ignorance. It was like you'd vanished. I needed a clean break, she said softly. I couldn't heal if I kept hearing your voice, seeing your messages. And now, with everything changed, the question hung between them, laden with possibilities both terrifying and exhilarating. Before she could answer, a sharp pain lanced through Eunha's abdomen, making her gasp and clutch at her belly. Minho was instantly alert. What's wrong? Should I call an ambulance? She breathed through the cramp, counting seconds until it passed. No, it's okay. The doctor said to expect some discomfort as they grow. But I should lie down. Without hesitation, Minho helped her to the bedroom, his touch gentle but sure as he supported her weight. The domesticity of the moment, his careful attention as he arranged pillows behind her back, brought water from the kitchen, created an intimacy more profound than any passionate embrace they'd shared before. Better? He asked, hovering uncertainly beside the bed. Eunha nodded, exhaustion suddenly washing over her. The emotional upheaval of their reunion combined with the physical demands of her pregnancy left her drained. You should rest, Minho said, noticing her fatigue. We don't have to decide everything right now. But we do need to decide something, she insisted. These babies are coming, ready or not. They deserve parents who at least have a plan. Minho pulled a chair beside the bed and sat, maintaining a respectful distance while staying close. What do you want, Eunha? Not what you think is practical or sensible or least scandalous. What does your heart want? The question stripped away her carefully constructed defenses. What did she want? Through all the months of anguish and solitude, of planning and adjusting, had she ever truly allowed herself to acknowledge her deepest desire? I want. Her voice faltered. I want them to have a father who loves them, who's present for them. I want stability and honesty. I want us. He finished quietly when she couldn't continue. Tears welled in her eyes. Is that even possible? After everything? With your life in the spotlight and mine deliberately hidden away. With 3 babies who will become instant tabloid fodder the moment they're connected to you. I don't have all the answers, Minho admitted. But I know that losing you taught me what matters most. Status, appearances, corporate politics. None of it filled the void you left. And now, his gaze moved to her rounded belly. Now there are 3 more reasons to get this right. Getting it right isn't simple. There's no corporate strategy for this situation. No, there isn't. He reached out tentatively, his hand hovering over hers, waiting for permission. When she didn't pull away, he gently covered her fingers with his. But perhaps we start with the most basic truth and build from there. What truth is that? She whispered. That I love you. That I've never stopped loving you. That everything else, the complications, the public opinion, even Jia's reaction to this news, is secondary to that fundamental reality. Eunha felt the babies move, a flutter like butterfly wings inside her, as if responding to their father's voice. They're moving, she said, placing his hand directly on her belly. Minho's expression transformed as he felt the subtle movements beneath his palm. Wonder, terror, and profound love played across his features in rapid succession. Hello, little ones, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Your father is here, and I promise. He looked up, meeting Eunha's gaze with fierce determination. I promise I'm not going anywhere. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but inside the small apartment, something fragile and new had begun to take root. A cautious hope that perhaps, against all odds, they might find their way to becoming a family. Neither of them noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, or the elegant woman inside watching the building with unwavering attention. Jia's expression revealed nothing as she raised a camera with a telephoto lens, carefully documenting Minho's arrival and continued presence in the apartment building where his pregnant former assistant had taken refuge. Some battles were fought with loud proclamations and public confrontations. Others required patience, precision, and perfect timing. He'd carefully helped her into a more comfortable position, covered her with a blanket, and then found himself unable to leave. The pull of her presence, of the miraculous lives growing within her, had anchored him to this modest apartment more powerfully than any business obligation ever could. His phone vibrated silently against his leg. The screen displayed 5 missed calls from Jia's private number and a text message that simply read, "We need to talk now." A chill ran through him despite the morning warmth. Something in her terseness suggested knowledge rather than suspicion. Had she followed him? The thought seemed paranoid until he remembered her family's resources and the stakes involved. "You're still here." He turned to find Unha standing in the bedroom doorway, hair tousled from sleep, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "I couldn't leave," he admitted. "Not when every instinct told me to stay." She moved to join him at the window. "What happens now?" In daylight, everything seems more complicated. Minho pocketed his phone without responding to Jia's message. "I have the press conference at 2. The formal announcement of Galaxy Group's restructuring and new investment partnerships. The one that paves the way for your separation becoming public?" "Yes." He hesitated. "Jia will be there, playing her role one last time." Unha's expression grew troubled. "She deserves better than this. Finding out her husband has not only been unfaithful but has fathered children with another woman. She's known about us for months." Unha. Knowing about an affair and confronting the reality of children are different things. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I never wanted to be the woman who destroys someone else's marriage. Our marriage was hollow long before you entered the picture," Minho said gently. "We married for family alliances and corporate advantages. There was respect and friendship once, but never love." His phone vibrated again insistently. "You should answer it," Unha said, nodding toward his pocket. "It might be important. Everything important is in this room." The sentiment warmed her, but practicality prevailed. "The outside world still exists, Minho. We can't hide from it forever." With reluctance, he pulled out his phone to find another message from Jia. "Either call me back in the next 5 minutes or I'm sending the photos to the board members directly. Your choice." Cold dread washed through him. "I need to make a call," he said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "It's about the press conference." Unha nodded, moving toward the kitchen. "I'll make some tea." Minho stepped onto the small balcony and dialed Jia's number, which she answered before the first ring completed. "How long have you known she's pregnant?" Jia asked without preamble, her voice clinically detached. Minho closed his eyes briefly. "Since yesterday. Triplets, I understand. Quite the achievement. How did you... Does it matter?" The edge in her voice sharpened. "What matters is that in 6 hours, we're supposed to stand together before the press, projecting stability and unity while you announce the corporate salvation I helped engineer. And now I discover you've spent the night with your pregnant mistress." "Jia, don't insult me with excuses or apologies," she cut in. "We're beyond that. What I need to know is whether you intend to honor our agreement through today's announcement, or if I need to activate my contingency plans immediately." The clinical way she referenced her contingency plans sent a chill through him. Jia had never been prone to emotional outbursts. Her calculating mind was what made her both a formidable business partner and a dangerous opponent. "I'll be there," he said finally. "As agreed." "Good." Her voice remained glacial. "And after today's performance, we'll renegotiate terms based on these new developments. 18% additional shares seem appropriate compensation for the public humiliation of being left for a pregnant former employee." "That's almost controlling interest." "Indeed it is. Consider the alternative: photos of your midnight visit to Ms. Park's apartment released alongside her medical records showing triplets with a genetic match to you. The board would remove you instantly to contain the scandal." The balcony door slid open behind Minho. He turned to find Unha standing there, face pale. "I need to go," he said into the phone. 2 o'clock, Minho. Jia reminded him coldly. "Don't be late. And do wear the blue tie. It photographs better with my outfit." The call ended with a decisive click. "She knows," Unha said quietly. Not a question, but a resigned statement. Minho nodded, unable to soften this reality. She has photos of me coming here. Somehow she's also learned about the triplets. My medical records, Unha whispered, a hand flying to her mouth. Last week at the specialist hospital, I used my corporate insurance card out of habit. It's still linked to Galaxy Group system. The realization hit them both simultaneously. Jia, with her family connections to the hospital board and access to company benefit systems, would have easily discovered the records. What does she want? Unha asked, her voice steadying despite the fear evident in her eyes. Control of the company, essentially. Additional shares that would give her family the majority interest. Minho ran a hand through his hair in frustration. She wants me to go through with today's press conference as if nothing has changed. And if you refuse, she releases everything. Ruins both our reputations and likely costs me the chairmanship in the ensuing scandal. Unha sank into a nearby chair, one hand protectively covering her belly. This is exactly what I feared. Innocent lives caught in corporate warfare. Minho knelt before her, taking her hands. Listen to me. Jia can demand shares, control, even public humiliation, but she can't change what matters most. You, me, our children. Whatever happens with Galaxy Group, we will face it together. You say that now, but when your entire life's work is threatened, it's not my life's work anymore, he interrupted with unexpected fierceness. That changed the moment you told me about these babies. Everything before was just preparing me for what truly matters. A soft knock at the apartment door interrupted them. Unha looked at Minho in alarm. Are you expecting anyone? He asked quietly. She shook her head, rising carefully from the chair. Minho moved protectively in front of her as they approached the door. The peephole revealed a distinguished older woman in an impeccable suit, standing patiently in the hallway. It's Secretary Jung, Unha said with surprise, recognizing Minho's longtime executive assistant. Minho's confusion was evident as he opened the door. Mrs. Jung? How did you know where to find me? The elegant 60-something woman entered with efficient calm, carrying a garment bag and briefcase. Mrs. CO provided your location, sir. She asked me to bring your press conference attire and the updated speaking notes. Her gaze moved to Unha, softening slightly. Good morning, Ms. Park. It's been some time. The surreal formality of the moment, his executive assistant delivering his clothes as if this were any normal business day, struck Unha as absurdly funny. A laugh escaped her that quickly transformed into something closer to a sob. Mrs. Jung set down the garment bag and briefcase, then did something unexpected. She reached for Unha's hand and clasped it warmly between both of hers. My own daughter had twins 5 years ago, she said quietly. The most difficult and most rewarding experience of her life. You're stronger than you know, Ms. Park. The simple human connection, offered without judgment, broke through Unha's carefully maintained composure. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Jung turned to Minho. Sir, there's something else you should know. The preliminary press list for today's conference includes reporters from the tabloids. They're rarely invited to corporate announcements. Minho's expression darkened with understanding. She's setting the stage. So it would appear, Mrs. Jung agreed with characteristic understatement. Mrs. CO has also requested a last-minute addition to the speaking program. She wants to say a few words after your announcement. Of course she does, he said grimly. Mrs. Jung checked her watch. You have 4 hours until the press conference, sir. I took the liberty of clearing your morning schedule. Minho looked at Unha, conflict evident in his expression. I need to speak with my lawyers before this press conference. If Jia is planning what I think she is, go, Unha said firmly. Deal with this now on your terms, not hers. I'll return as soon as possible, he promised, taking her hands in his. Tonight, we'll face whatever comes next together. As Minho gathered the items Mrs. Jung had brought, the older woman approached Unha again. Ms. Park, if I may, I've served the CO family for 32 years. I've witnessed the rise of Galaxy Group from a modest enterprise to a corporate giant, and I've observed the personal sacrifices made in service to that growth. She glanced briefly toward Min-ho, who was changing in the other room. In all those years, I've never seen Chairman Seo look at anyone the way he looks at you. Before Eun-ha could respond, Mrs. Jung pressed a business card into her hand. This is my personal number. Should you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call. The door closed behind them moments later, leaving Eun-ha alone in the suddenly empty apartment. She moved to the window, watching as Min-ho and Mrs. Jung emerged onto the street below and entered a waiting car. Her phone chimed with a message notification. I'll return as soon as I can. Trust me. Another message followed immediately. I love you, all four of you. Eun-ha pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the now familiar flutter of movement within. Your father is fighting for us, she whispered to her unborn children. And so am I. She moved decisively to her laptop, powered it on, and began to type an email to her former university professor, the one who now ran the country's most influential business ethics journal. The subject line read simply, "The true story behind Galaxy Group's restructuring, exclusive interview." If Jia wanted to control the narrative, she would discover she wasn't the only one capable of strategic thinking. Some battles required patience and perfect timing. Others demanded bold, preemptive strikes. Eun-ha slipped through the service entrance, her newly purchased loose-fitting blazer concealing her pregnancy just enough to avoid immediate notice. Professor Kim had responded to her email within minutes, agreeing to meet her in person before the press conference. You're taking an enormous risk coming here, the professor said quietly as they settled into a small meeting room 3 floors below the executive suite. His silver hair and distinguished appearance commanded instant respect, but his eyes held genuine concern. Are you certain about this course of action? I've never been more certain of anything, Eun-ha replied, sliding a USB drive across the table. Everything is documented there: financial records, board meeting minutes, communications between Jia's family fund and foreign investors. The so-called restructuring is actually a calculated power grab disguised as corporate salvation. Professor Kim pocketed the drive. And you're prepared for the personal consequences? Once this story breaks, your relationship with Chairman Seo becomes public. Your privacy was compromised the moment Jia discovered my pregnancy, Eun-ha finished. At least this way, the truth emerges on our terms, alongside the corporate manipulation. A gentle knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Jung, outwardly composed but with an urgency in her movements. Ms. Park, there's been a development. Mrs. Seo has arrived early with her legal team. They're meeting with the chairman now. Her carefully neutral expression cracked slightly. It's not proceeding well. Eun-ha rose. Where? Executive conference room, 14th floor. But security won't let you. Eun-ha was already moving toward the door. Professor Kim, delay publishing until after the press conference unless you hear otherwise from me. This may change everything. The elevator ride to the 14th floor stretched eternally. Eun-ha's heart pounded against her ribs as she rehearsed what she might say. The security guard stationed outside the conference room recognized her from her years working at Galaxy Group. Ms. Park, I can't let you in there. Strict orders. From Mrs. Seo or Chairman Seo? Eun-ha asked, summoning the authoritative tone she'd used in countless business negotiations. The guard hesitated. Mrs. Seo, I'm here at the chairman's request, she lied smoothly. Check with him directly if you need confirmation. The moment's uncertainty was enough. Eun-ha pushed past him and opened the door. The scene inside froze at her entrance. Min-ho stood at the head of the long table, tie loosened, face flushed with anger. Across from him sat Jia, immaculate in a tailored blue suit, flanked by 3 stone-faced attorneys. Document stacks covered the polished surface between them. Eun-ha, Min-ho breathed, surprise and concern warring in his expression. Jia's perfect composure flickered only briefly before she recovered with a cold smile. How theatrical. The pregnant mistress arrives just in time for the final act. I thought it was time we met face to face, Eun-ha said calmly, closing the door behind her. Since you already know everything about me. Jia gestured dismissively. There's little to know beyond the obvious. You slept with my husband and now carry his children. Hardly original, though the triplets add a certain dramatic flair. One of the attorneys leaned toward Jia, whispering urgently, but she waved him off. What exactly do you hope to accomplish here, Ms. Park? Jia continued. The agreements are being finalized. In exchange for my silence regarding your condition, my husband has generously agreed to transfer additional shares that will secure my family's controlling interest in Galaxy Group. You mean blackmail? Unha clarified, moving further into the room. You're blackmailing him with the threat of scandal. I prefer to think of it as renegotiating terms based on changed circumstances. Jia's smile remained fixed, but her eyes had hardened. Business, not emotion. Minho stepped toward Unha. You shouldn't be here. We agreed. Plans change. Unha interrupted gently. She turned back to Jia. What if I told you Professor Kim of Seoul National University is downstairs right now with documentation of how your family orchestrated this entire so-called financial crisis to wrestle control from Minho? The room went silent. Jia's perfect facade cracked momentarily before she laughed. A brittle, hollow sound. That's absurd. There's no evidence of any such. The encrypted communications between your father and Harmony Investment Group from 6 months ago. Unha continued. The coordinated withdrawal of capital that triggered the liquidity crisis. The artificially inflated interest rates on the emergency financing. With each detail, Jia's expression grew more rigid. The attorneys exchanged concerned glances. You're bluffing, Jia said finally, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. You accessed my medical records, Unha replied. I accessed financial ones. The difference is mine was legal. I still had authorized access to the system when the crisis began. I downloaded everything before I left. Minho stared at her in astonishment. You knew? All this time. I suspected, Unha corrected. I needed time to compile everything to understand the full scope. Professor Kim's ethics journal is prepared to publish all of it, unless we reach a different agreement. One of the attorneys cleared his throat. Mrs. Seo, if these allegations have substantiation, we should— Quiet, Jia snapped. She studied Unha with new calculation in her gaze. What exactly are you proposing? A clean separation, Unha said simply. Minho retains his chairmanship and controlling interest. You receive a fair divorce settlement, generous but not controlling shares. No one's reputation is publicly damaged. And why would I possibly agree to that when I hold such powerful leverage? Jia's composure had returned, her voice silky with confidence. Because scandal cuts both ways, Minho interjected, understanding dawning on his face. If Unha's evidence becomes public, your family's manipulation constitutes securities fraud. Your father's companies would face investigation. The CO name might be temporarily tarnished by my personal choices, but your family's businesses would be destroyed. Jia's glacial calm finally shattered. You would destroy everything? Generations of business relationships, the entire conglomerate? For her, she spat the last word with undisguised contempt. Not for me, Unha said quietly. For his children. For a chance at happiness neither of you ever had in your arrangement. Something shifted in Jia's expression. Something complex and unexpectedly human beneath the polished exterior. For a fleeting moment, Unha glimpsed what might have been loneliness, even grief. You think he'll be different with you? Jia asked softly, almost pitying. That children will transform him from the workaholic who builds empires into some devoted family man? I don't know, Unha answered honestly. But we deserve the chance to find out without destruction on either side. The conference room fell silent. Outside, they could hear the increasing bustle as journalists and executives gathered for the press conference. Jia stood abruptly, gathering her designer handbag. I need to speak with my attorneys privately. The press conference begins in 40 minutes. I'll give you my answer before then. She motioned to her legal team, who collected their documents and followed her toward the door. At the threshold, Jia paused, looking back at Min-ho. 3 children, she said, her voice stripped of artifice for perhaps the first time. I couldn't give you even one. Perhaps that was the universe's wisdom after all. The door closed behind them, leaving Min-ho and Eun-ha alone in the suddenly quiet room. You shouldn't have come, Min-ho said, crossing to Eun-ha with concern etched into his features. The stress, the risk, was mine to take, she finished firmly. This affects all of us. I couldn't sit passively waiting for others to determine our future. He reached for her hands, holding them tightly. You had evidence all along? Why didn't you tell me? At first, I wasn't certain what I had. Then, when I realized the scale of the manipulation, she hesitated. I wasn't sure which would win. Your need for justice or your desire to protect the company your grandfather built. The raw honesty hung between them. Min-ho's expression shifted through a complex range of emotions. Hurt, understanding, admiration. And now, he asked softly, now I believe you meant what you said this morning, that your priorities have changed, that we face whatever comes next together. Min-ho's phone vibrated on the conference table. They both turned to look at it, breaking the moment's intimacy. Jia? Eun-ha asked. He checked the screen. No, Mrs. Jung. The press is fully assembled. We need to decide how to proceed, regardless of Jia's answer. Eun-ha moved to the window overlooking Seoul's skyline. The afternoon sun illuminated the sprawling cityscape, beautiful, complex, and unforgiving. Somewhere in that urban expanse was her small apartment, the nursery furniture she'd begun assembling, the future she'd tried so carefully to plan. If we do this, she said, not turning around, there's no going back, not to my quiet life, not to your controlled public image. She felt Min-ho's presence behind her before his hands gently settled on her shoulders. I don't want to go back, he said simply. I want to go forward, with you, with our children, whatever that looks like. The conference room door opened without a knock. Jia entered alone, her expression unreadable. Both Min-ho and Eun-ha turned to face her. My attorneys advise against any agreement without thorough verification of Ms. Park's claims, she began formally. However, I've made my decision regardless. She placed a slim leather folder on the conference table. Revised separation terms. My family retains our original investment shares, but not the additional controlling interest. I receive the vacation properties in New York and Paris, plus the agreed financial settlement. Min-ho approached the table cautiously. And your conditions? 2 non-negotiable points, Jia replied. First, I announce our separation at today's press conference, controlling the narrative one final time as Galaxy Group's chairwoman. Eun-ha tensed. And the second condition? Jia turned to face her directly. You ensure those children know their Korean heritage. Whatever life you build with Min-ho, they should understand where they come from, all sides of their family history. The unexpected request momentarily stunned both of them. That's your condition? Min-ho asked carefully. Is it so surprising that I might care about the future of children who carry the CO bloodline? Jia's perfect mask slipped just enough to reveal something vulnerable beneath. We may not have children of our own, Min-ho, but I spent 8 years as part of your family. Its legacy matters to me too. Eun-ha stepped forward. They will know their heritage. All of it, the accomplishments and the complexities. Jia nodded once, decisively. Then we have an agreement. She glanced at her watch. The press conference begins in 20 minutes. I suggest you review the terms quickly, Min-ho. I'll be announcing our separation before introducing you as the continuing chairman who will lead Galaxy Group into its next chapter. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. Ms. Park, I recommend remaining out of sight until after the press conference. The announcement of our separation will create enough speculation without adding visual confirmation of the reason. The uncharacteristic consideration surprised Eun-ha. Thank you, she said quietly. Jia's expression remained unreadable. Don't mistake pragmatism for kindness. We're all business people here. making the most advantageous arrangements possible under difficult circumstances. As the door closed behind her, Minho let out a long breath. I never thought she would agree. She's protecting her family's interests, just as we're protecting ours, Eun-ha observed, moving to examine the agreement on the table. It's what she's always done best. Minho joined her, scanning the documents with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. The terms are, as she stated, fair, even generous in some respects. Do you trust her to follow through? Eun-ha asked. Oddly enough, yes. Jia values her reputation above almost everything. Once she gives her word publicly, she'll honor it. Mrs. Jung appeared at the door. Sir, 15 minutes until the press conference. The communications team needs you for final preparations. Minho nodded. I'll be right there. He turned back to Eun-ha after Mrs. Jung departed. Wait for me in my office. Whatever happens down there, we'll leave together afterward. Together? She echoed, the simple word carrying the weight of all they'd been through and all that lay ahead. Minho signed the agreement with a decisive stroke, then drew Eun-ha into a gentle embrace, careful of her pregnancy. No more secrets between us, he murmured against her hair. No more separate battles. No more running away, she promised, feeling the baby stir as if in agreement. They parted reluctantly, Minho straightening his tie as he prepared to face the waiting press. At the door, he paused, looking back at Eun-ha standing amid the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. When this is over, he said quietly, I want to take you to meet my grandfather, the real founder of everything that bears our name. The significance of the invitation wasn't lost on Eun-ha. In Korean corporate families, such introductions carried profound meaning, an acknowledgement of permanence, of family recognition. I'd like that, she replied simply. After he left, Eun-ha gathered her strength and made her way to Minho's executive office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Seoul spreading out before her, the city where she'd built her career, fallen in love despite her better judgment, and now stood on the precipice of a life she'd never imagined. She placed both hands over her belly, feeling the now familiar movements within. We're going to be okay, she whispered to her unborn children. All of us together. On the desk, a monitor displayed the live feed from the press conference room below. Jia had just taken the podium, immaculate and composed as ever. The camera panned briefly to Minho, waiting in the wings, his expression resolute as he prepared to face whatever came next. Thank you all for joining us today. Jia's voice carried through the speakers with crystalline clarity. Galaxy Group stands at a pivotal moment in its storied history. Eun-ha leaned forward, studying the woman who had been her unseen adversary. Jia commanded the room effortlessly, her designer suit and perfect posture embodying corporate nobility. As many of you know, Galaxy Group has navigated significant financial challenges in recent quarters. Today, Chairman CEO will outline our comprehensive restructuring strategy, a vision that secures our company's future while honoring its legacy. Practiced pause, perfectly timed. Jia's gaze swept the audience before continuing with what appeared to be impromptu sincerity. Before that announcement, however, I wish to share something personal. Her voice softened just enough to draw everyone closer. After 8 years of marriage and partnership, Chairman CEO and I have made the difficult decision to separate. The press room erupted in murmurs. Cameras clicked frantically. On screen, Eun-ha could see Minho's profile as he stood just off stage, his expression carefully neutral despite the tension visible in his shoulders. Our decision is mutual and amicable, Jia continued smoothly once the initial reaction subsided. We remain committed to Galaxy Group's success, and will continue our professional collaboration while pursuing separate personal paths. The rehearsed diplomatic phrasing contrasted sharply with the morning's heated confrontation. Eun-ha marveled at Jia's composure, how effortlessly she transformed blackmail and bitter negotiation into a narrative of dignified, mutual decision-making. I will retain my family's original investment in Galaxy Group while transitioning from my role as chairwoman. Today marks my final official appearance in this capacity. Jia's perfect smile didn't waver. It has been my privilege to serve this company, and I leave its future in very capable hands. She gestured toward the side of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman Min-ho Seo. Min-ho walked into the frame, outwardly composed though Eun-ha could read the subtle signs of strain around his eyes. The two stood side by side momentarily, presenting a united front despite everything. Their brief, formal handshake looked convincingly cordial to anyone unaware of the truth. As Jia stepped away from the podium, something unscripted happened. She leaned toward Min-ho, whispering something that made him turn toward her with genuine surprise. The cameras caught the moment, a flash of authentic emotion breaking through their choreographed performance. Eun-ha felt a curious tightness in her chest. What had Jia said in that unguarded moment? Min-ho took his position at the podium, gathering himself visibly before addressing the room. Thank you, Jia, for your grace and contributions to Galaxy Group. His voice carried the weight of sincerity that couldn't be entirely manufactured. While our personal paths diverge, the respect remains. He paused, shuffling the notes before him, then set them aside entirely. Eun-ha recognized the gesture immediately, Min-ho abandoning prepared remarks for something unscripted. Her heart rate quickened. I stand before you at a crossroads, both personal and professional. He began, his voice gaining strength with each word. Galaxy Group faces challenges, yes, but not the existential threat that has been portrayed in recent market analyses. Eun-ha sat straighter. This wasn't the planned announcement. The restructuring we announced today is not a desperate measure but a strategic realignment. Our core businesses remain strong, our innovation pipeline robust. Min-ho's gaze swept across the audience with newfound intensity. What we require is not outside rescue but internal transformation, a return to the founding principles that made Galaxy Group a cornerstone of Korean industry. The camera panned across confused journalists frantically taking notes. This narrative diverged sharply from the financial media's reporting of recent months. My grandfather built this company on 3 pillars: innovation, integrity, and family legacy, Min-ho continued. Today, I reaffirm my commitment to all 3. Eun-ha's hand moved instinctively to her belly at the word family. The babies shifted within her, as if responding to their father's voice even through the electronic medium. In the coming days, Galaxy Group will release documentation demonstrating the artificial nature of our recent financial pressures, evidence of market manipulation that created the illusion of crisis where no fundamental weakness existed. Gasps rippled through the press corps. On screen, Eun-ha caught a glimpse of Jia's expression as she sat in the front row, outwardly composed but with a tightness around her eyes that betrayed her surprise. This wasn't part of their agreement. This is not about assigning blame, Min-ho clarified quickly, but about transparency as we move forward. Galaxy Group will emerge stronger, more ethical, and recommitted to the values upon which it was founded. He paused, seeming to gather himself for what came next. On a personal note, this period of reflection has clarified what matters most. His voice softened perceptibly. Beyond corporate success and market position lies something far more precious: the legacy we create through our children, the future we build through our families. Eun-ha's breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just speaking metaphorically. In the coming months, I will be embracing not only my role as chairman but a new and profound responsibility as a father. Min-ho's gaze seemed to look directly into the camera, as if speaking to Eun-ha alone. I share this not to distract from today's corporate announcements, but because authenticity must begin at the top. Galaxy Group's next chapter will be built on complete transparency. Starting with my own life. The press room erupted in chaos, journalists shouting questions and cameras flashing incessantly. Through it all, Min-ho remained steady at the podium, neither flinching nor retreating from his unexpected revelation. The office door opened behind Eun-ha, startling her from the screen. She turned to find Mrs. Jung entering with brisk efficiency. Ms. Park, the chairman requests your presence downstairs immediately. Eun-ha stared at her in disbelief. Downstairs? At the press conference? Mrs. Jung's usually impassive face softened slightly. He's finishing his statement now. He wants you beside him for questions. But we agreed. I was supposed to remain out of sight until after. Plans change, Mrs. Jung said, echoing Unha's earlier words. Sometimes courage demands.